section. Oh, that'd be good. So we're starting in 25 and we're going 25. We are not going to get through all this tonight. I know we're not. At the pace we go through things, it's not going to go that fast. But 25 through 31 is all one big chunk section. Is there anybody who did like engineering or drafting or design? Grant would probably really like this section because this is a section that's all about the tabernacle and ultimately the temple. This is creating the space for where God meets his people. Okay? Now, it's going to talk at length about these pieces, but the other side is I want to just kind of set the stage. We want to approach this as we're thinking about a church or a temple. But many of the things that are going on here are more attuned. How many of you served in the military? All right. Don't have anybody here. But okay, so Steve. Well, thank you for attempting. This is realistically, this is a tent, but think of this as an officer's tent where they would entertain the foreign dignitaries. Okay, that's the imagery that's going on here. This is a field command, but not just a field command. It's a field command where you'd have hold diplomatic negotiations. Okay, can you get it in your head? You kind of have a picture of what I'm talking about. That's the imagery for their day that God is using for the tabernacle, a tent of meeting. Okay? So, in many ways, as we go through these pieces, these are going to be the things necessary to follow the laws of hospitality and being the host to those who you want to have good relations with. You get the imagery I'm trying to paint, which is very different than what we think of when we think about a temple or a church, right? So, with that in mind, we're going to go through these sections, and it's going to describe in detail the pieces of what is necessary for God to meet with us. All right? So my first section is 25, 1 through 9. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the people of Israel that they take for me a contribution. From every man whose heart moves him, you shall receive the contribution for me. This is a contribution that you shall receive from me: gold, silver, and bronze, blue and purple and scarlet yarns, and fine twined linen, goat's hair, tanned ram skins, goat skins, acacia wood, oil for the lamps, spices for the anointing oil and for the fragrant incense, onyx stones and stones for setting, for the ephod and the breastplate. And let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell in their midst, exactly as I show you concerning the pattern of the tabernacle and all its furniture, you shall make it." So what do you think? What do you notice? What questions does it make you ask?
One translation says the ram skins should be dyed red.
So there is a question as to whether the goat's hair that is before the tanned ram skins is dealing with a separate notion, or if that is the red tanned. Because I've seen both translated differently. The color red and is the same as the word Edom. Remember that name? And also it's very similar to the word for goat. So it could be either direction.
So my question is, it seems like he's always about an upside down where the poor are elevated over, but yet it sounds like it's gonna be something extravagant, which seems backwards.
So there's this level where it sounds pretty extravagant. And yet, as you said, all the way through, we've seen this kind of upside down nature of God, right? Where there's a leveling of the playing field. Yet, I want to make sure we notice one key phrase in here. From every man whose heart moves him. This was not a required gift. So for those who are poor, they may not be able to contribute, but they can contribute what they want, what they feel led to. So maybe if you're poor, you might just be able to contribute a goat skin or a ram skin or something like that. That if you've got gold and silver and bronze, you can contribute that. It's according to what you've been led to. Yes.
Would there have been much wealth among the tribes because they just left Egypt and they've been enslaved? And they
So,
But they had a bunch of stuff when they left there.
so they were all slaves, and so they had their animals. But as Chris just pointed out, remember right before they left, it says that God made it favorable to the people, and they gave them stuff. It's like, please get out of here. Take our stuff and leave. We didn't come to rob you. We don't care. Just take it and go. If this is what it means for you to leave and all these plagues leave us, take our gold and our silver and bronze and just get out of here. So to a certain degree, they wouldn't necessarily have had any wealth of their own, but they were given a lot of wealth that was not what they earned. Now think about that for just a little bit. I mean, you could build a case that yes, they were slaves and therefore these gifts were kind of paying them for their service. But understand that's kind of a little bit of a stretch because God is the one who made them favorable. Remember what we talked about even back with Abraham, right? That God is the one who caused him to be blessed. God promises he'll give us what we need, but in this instance, they're given so much more than what they need.
And this is God speaking to Moses.
This is God speaking to Moses. Yes, they're up on the mountain. As was pointed out last week, that people might be wondering what's going on. But Moses is being given some technical blueprints here just a little bit. So, what else do you notice? Anything?
What Shittim wood?
What?
What Shittim wood?
Yours says Shittim wood. Mine says acacia. Anybody else to say something different?
Acacia.
I got acacia.
Let's pull up the Hebrew and see.
Acacia in ours says wood darker and harder than oak and avoided by wood-eating insects.
That's
That relates to whatever word we have.
No, but
They don't,
the,
they don't like it.
oh,
So it would be,
probably smart then.
yeah.
the Shittim is actually the actual Hebrew word that is in Hebrew. I mean, it's a transliteration of that word. And it says it's probably acacia wood. Acacia, which is interesting. If you've seen pictures of deserts, acacia wood doesn't grow straight. It's kind of this squiggly, scraggly. It makes me think kind of like willow or a curly willow kind of wood. But yet there's straight poles of this, so that would probably be extremely prized. And yeah, like your notes say, it's a desert tree. So one, it has to be really water tolerant, drought tolerant. But two, it's more bug resistant, which is going to be helpful if you're building a structure out of it, right?
It would also be a very fine grain because it wouldn't grow much moisture.
Probably, yeah. So to get some of the long poles we're gonna read about, these are going to be some of the nicest trees that they could find.
Be a lot stronger.
Probably, yeah.
They
Go
want
ahead.
the stones for the breastplate, are we gonna have a war?
Huh. So she just said they're gonna have stones for a breastplate, are we gonna have a war? That's what we tend to think of, isn't it? Like I said, remember, this is drawing on the imagery of a field command for an army. So the natural thought is the breastplate is more of the accoutrements of battle. What else do you notice? Go ahead.
Chris mentioned the fact that this is sort of feels upside down from what God normally does things. We also have to figure, if this is a place that God's setting up to be that symbol of a place where generals, the important people meet, if the president was coming to meet us today, would we meet him in the bathroom? No, we. Depends on the message you want to, I understand that, but think of maybe you should say that, think of a president you really respect, whatever. Are you gonna meet him in the bathroom?
Oh, we're gonna get a cocoa and cookies like
Good.
we did Santa.
We want the place to be nice.
We,
But the whole message has been not in fresh means.
in general, that's what we've seen up to this point, right? We don't treat the rich with favor, nor do we necessarily raise up the poor just because they're poor. There's this notion of treating everybody appropriately. I don't want to say with equally, that's not the case, but there's an appropriate level of care. Being real honest, if we're talking about a foreign dignitary and we're bringing them in here, we're gonna serve them a meal, I probably wouldn't pull the wooden seat chairs out. I wanna make sure we get the nicer cushioned chairs, right? And that's kind of the notion that we have going on here. This is the finest that we have. Does that make sense? Anything else you notice? No, he's talking about the concert. If not, we can move on. Okay, next section, 10 through 16. They shall make an ark of acacia wood. 2 cubits and a half shall be its length, a cubit and a half its breadth, and a cubit and a half its height. You shall overlay it with pure gold. Inside and outside you shall overlay it, and you shall make on it a molding of gold around it. You shall cast 4 rings of gold for it, and put them on its 4 feet. 2 rings on the one side of it, and 2 rings on the other side. You shall make poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold. And you shall put the poles into the rings on the sides of the ark to carry the ark by them. The poles shall remain in the rings of the ark, they shall not be taken from it. And you shall put into the ark the testimony I shall give you. What do you think? Unless you know what it looks like. You want to go grab my cubit measure?
This, our translation say, I lost it here.
Ours says 25 inches by 27 inches by 27.
25 inches, 27, 27.
45.
45 by 27 by 27. Listen, when we went to the Ark encounter in Kentucky, actually, this was in the clearance bin, so I was glad to have it. This is the Egyptian royal cubit. It's 20.6 inches. Now, I think you can see the stripes on here. This one right here is the Hebrew cubit. It's 17.5 inches. So if you do 17.5 times 1.5, it's going to get close to that 27 inches. If it was, what did it say, 2.5, so that's 45 plus a half. So you're gonna get somewhere in that vicinity. But this would be, so they would have whoever the foreman of the job would always carry the official cubit for the job, the official measuring stick. It was not meant to beat people with, so I feel that as I'm holding it. But it was literally the part of the job of being a foreman was to make sure that everything was measured properly. And so one person would be given this task, but that's why, but that's about the length of a cubit. Another, they said the standard way is if you take from your elbow to the tip of your hand is pretty close to what a cubit would be. See, this one's a long cubit, so make sense? So, but you're still talking about two foot, little over 2 foot wide, little over 2 foot tall, and just under 3.5, 4 foot long. So about twice.
Explanation here, Sam, says that the information that put in it is from the stone tablet, which probably makes sense when you look at the rings and the carrying poles and everything else, but those are going to be very different.
So the testimony that it's talking about will be what we tend to find synonymous with the stone tablets of the 10 Commandments. But it would have a whole lot more on it than that. It would probably have all the law that we just have discussed over the last couple of weeks, the last 7 weeks of looking at law code, I think. And again, there would be 2 copies of it. One copy for God, one copy for the people.
Sorry, me, you're backwards again, you're mirrored.
So, but is this what the Jewish people call the ark?
This is the ark, absolutely,
That's what they're making now.
correct.
When I've been in a Jewish church, they carry this around and they reverently open it or put it in places.
So
Understood everything.
in a synagogue where the ark should be, they put often their Torah cabinet. And it's filled with either their corporate copy of their scripture or scrolls of the Torah. But this would be the place of honor. What else do you notice about it?
Apparently it's meant to be mobile. 'Cause it
Yeah.
says not to take the.
Don't take the poles out. This is meant to be mobile. This is not going to be just put in one place and that's the end of it. God's going to go with them wherever they go.
It also has to be covered with gold.
And it is covered with gold. Right. Now, why do you think God would do that? I mean, you brought up the question. If God's trying to level the playing field for the most part, why would God ask that this be covered in gold?
It doesn't rust.
Well, no, there's that. It doesn't rust. It doesn't tarnish.
Water resistant.
Be water resistant.
Make it all better.
It sets it apart. Actually, gold is not as heavy as you think.
Really.
If it's just like overlaid with gold and it's not solid, then it wouldn't be nearly as heavy as if it was overlaid with steel or lead or something like that.
So which is heavier, a pound of gold or a pound of feathers?
A pound is a pound is a pound. I figured somebody was gonna try to throw that out.
I mean, I guess I'd get rid of the golden calf.
We're not there yet. Don't jump to the golden calf. But
But if they have gold, they always have wealth. They always have that with them.
there is. What makes gold valuable?
Us putting a value on it.
We see it as more valuable. That's the only thing that makes gold valuable. We put a price on it. We value it. It doesn't tarnish, so therefore it's pretty. We like it.
Is it a scarcity?
They estimate that you could take all the gold in the world and it would make a 45-foot cube. 45 foot by 45 foot by 45 foot. And that's about all the gold that there is.
That's scarce.
That's scarce, but it's not that scarce. And I mean, this room's probably about 30 foot wide. So you start thinking about how big 45 foot is cube. That's a lot of gold, considering, you know, most of us have a little, at least that little ring of it, and some people have quite a bit of it. And that's not talking about any of the gold bars. So why would God use gold?
It's pure. And it's pure. It's one. It's pure.
It's easy to tell when it's pure. I think Mindy's answer earlier was the most appropriate. We have come to understand that gold is scarce and gold is valuable. So it would cause us to make it set apart. We would believe that it's worth more. It's shiny. Yeah. There's this notion about it. The reason it becomes valuable is because we see in it something that is abnormal. You don't just see gold laying around. And it's just a little other than. You know what I mean? So imagine a box completely covered in gold. Think that might stand out a little bit?
You're right.
It would be hard to hide. Absolutely. Now, for people who are traveling in the middle of the desert, does that sound like something you'd really want to do, is to have something that's hard to hide? But think of the symbolism of that too. God doesn't want to hide. God is not our God. The God of the Israelite people is not a God that's foreign and hidden. He is a God that is right there out in the middle for everyone to see. And as Chris said, it's mobile. They weren't supposed to take the poles out. Think of the symbolism of that. Where every other god is confined to a place, the ark that represents their God is mobile. For the record, this word ark is the exact same word as the Ark of Noah, which, if you remember when we talked about Noah, I said it wasn't a boat. It was more like a giant coffin. It was a box. This is a box. You know, when you're given a height and width and depth and it's square, that's a box. So just for the record, if Nancy Teeter was here, I would make sure to smash her picture of Noah's Ark. She's not hardly been back since I smashed that. So. Anything else you notice in these 7 verses? Or any other questions you want? Go for it.
It's just kind of ironic, that these, God specifies that all this has to be inlaid in gold, and tree covered with gold. and all this gold and shiny stuff, but yet when you fast forward to when Christ was born, it's about as humble as you could get with no flashy neon signs and gold all around and that.
So, we're gonna get to that here in just a second. But keep that thought, okay?
It makes you wonder also why it was so specific about the size.
What do you think?
Maybe it fit the tablets, or tablets fit in, you know.
We looked up on, it says that this wood is equivalent to walnut.
It's in the walnut family.
Well, it's like a walnut,
It's
yeah.
like-
Characteristics,
Durable walnut's heavy.
It's a heavy duty wood.
And you put a layer, even a thin layer of gold on it, it's gonna be pretty heavy.
So you've got 2 poles, and just for the record, they would have 4 people that carry it. Anything else? All right, next paragraph, 17 through 22. You shall make a mercy seat of pure gold, 2 cubits and a half shall be its length, a cubit and a half its breadth. And you shall make 2 cherubim of gold, of hammered work shall you make them on the 2 ends of the mercy seat. Make 1 cherub on the one end and the other cherub on the other end. Of one piece with the mercy seat shall you make the cherubim on its 2 ends. The cherubim shall spread out their wings above, overshadowing the mercy seat with their wings. Their faces one to another toward the mercy seat shall the faces of the cherubim be. And you shall put the mercy seat on top of the ark, and in the ark you shall put the testimony that I shall give you. There I will meet with you, and from above the mercy seat, between the 2 cherubim that are on the ark of the testimony, I will speak with you about all that I will give you in commandment for the people of Israel. What do you think? What do you notice? What questions does it make you ask?
Is this God saying that Moses is gonna sit on the mercy seat?
Nope. He said very clearly, right here in that last verse, from between the 2 cherubim that are on the ark of the testimony, I will speak to you. This is his earthly throne.
My Bible calls it an atonement cover instead of a mercy seat.
So, yeah, those are both the same kind of notion. This is the place where you will come to be made one, to be at one meet with God. So just to be clear, we'll get there. Get there. So you have the ark, and this mercy seat or atonement cover is going to go on top of the ark. So the ark is functioning like the dais for the throne. Do you get the picture of what I'm painting? So like if you were to go into a foreign dignitary's tent, they would still build a platform to show that the king or the general or whoever is higher than who's meeting with them. And on top of it, they would have their throne or their chair from which they dispensed their justice. We talk about the atonement piece. Don, is it same as basket Moses would have been placed into? I don't know if, no, that's a basket. That was not an ark. That's a different term.
Or she talked about the wood.
I don't know.
How long ago?
Don, is that you talk about the ark for the basket, or are you talking about the wood? You're muted. Oh, she's typing.
Well, she said wood.
She said.
She said what?
No, the basket that Moses was put in was woven out of reeds. What other things do you find yourself asking?
It sounds like the cherubim are hovering.
So yeah, you got this notion of the cherubim with their wings extended, hovering over, almost protectively over the mercy seat. Now, think about this for a second. Have anybody watched like period pieces like historical fiction or even historical documents of like medieval kings and queens? If you go up to a throne, what do you typically see? You see the king and queen in front of you, and then you see guards to either side, right? Sentinels, yes, that kind of notion. These cherubim are meant to have the impression of being the guards over where God is.
Our Bible uses the word, it says probably similar to winged sphinxes.
Okay, so first picture here, the Babylonian cherubim. Go ahead and share the screen. You got this. The far right one. Right there. Oh, you gotta pull it over to the. Okay, so go ahead and full screen that. So these are Babylonian cherubim. They're not the little cute Cupid cherubs we think of. These would have probably, think of more along the lines of the Sphinx or like a griffin where they would have probably claws on the feet on the front. They would be winged. Now, these are Babylonian, so you can tell that distinguishable Babylonian beard and hairstyle. And actually, I think these are, I don't remember what museum these are in, but they are actually, there's an archway here that you can walk underneath this and see these. They're big. These are really big. And that's what the Babylonians looked at. Now, Melissa, I want you to pull this picture down here at the bottom and share that. Yep, that. Can you see that, Don? No? Okay, so stop sharing.
I can see the Babylonian ones.
Go ahead and share screen, but this time just share screen 1. There we go. Can you see that?
Yes.
Anybody recognize that?
Daniel Revelation.
It's from Revelation. The creature with 4 heads. The head of a human, the head of a lion, the head of an ox, and the head of an eagle with eyes all over it. And it has 6 wings. This is the picture, an artist rendition of an Israelite cherubim. A little freaky, isn't it? Okay, stop sharing that and show the Met throne room. Next picture. Go ahead, just close that one. Go to the next picture. This is a recreation the Met Gallery did for exhibit. You can kind of see here, but these even have 4 faces on them. And so you have this notion of the 2 of them kind of hovering over protectively, but you also have the 2 guards. This is a artist rendition of Solomon's temple. But these are not creatures like we would see anywhere. A little frightening, aren't they?
And there's no room on the seat.
There is no room on the seat, absolutely. So there's no way that Moses could sit there. This was not the place of Moses. And I'm so glad you grabbed that. The only thing that could be here is a voice, right? A whisper, a spirit, something that is not of us.
How many faces?
4.
I see 3, okay.
Well, on the backside would be the eagle.
Oh, all right.
Are they supposed to represent the 4 gospels?
So the 4 faces come to represent the 4 gospels, the 4 living creatures. Mark is the lion, Matthew is the ox, Luke is the human, and John is the eagle. They come to represent that. But it also, remember we had this conversation back to when we were talking in Genesis. These represent the strata of creation. You have wild beasts, you have beasts of burden, and you have humanity, and then you have the beasts of the air and the sea. Remember the three different kinds of creation. The birds and the fish are on one day, you have the wild animals, the beasts of burden, and then humanity. And so they become very synonymous with many things. The early Christians absolutely saw the 4 gospels in this picture.
They also seem to have cloven hooves.
Yeah, that's pretty common. And I don't know, it never really describes what their feet look like. But for many, especially if you could have seen the Babylonian seraphs, they would have the back end of an ox, so they'd have a cloven hoof, and the front end would often look like a lion. And so I haven't really seen, I get more the impression that picture that I showed you that was more like an artist's drawing of it, they probably had more of a human body. I tend to lean more that way than this, but you can kind of get the picture that these are not something you'd want to mess with, right? Again, that notion of the sentinels on either side. You got 2 of them protecting God and 2 of them standing guard. But in the tabernacle, we just have the 2 of them protecting God. Okay?
You know what would fit there?
What?
A kid. And you know how you have the notion of like, be childlike? Like they wouldn't have the fear.
Yeah, there's nothing big that could fit there. At best, maybe a kid. Maybe there's a part of me that can only see. Here you go, put Hudson right there.
Well, what I'm thinking is like, if you took your, I guess, and the many adventures of us taking kids to museums and stuff, I'm like, that would be like a lost one to be looking and they'd be sitting somewhere.
A little toddler crawls up
Yeah.
and sits right there.
Or opens it and gives them something.
Yes. But
So-
I don't know that they would be threatened or frightened by those images maybe as much as what adults would be.
So on the one hand, these are, the cherubim are absolutely meant to acknowledge that there's something, if they are the guards, then what they are guarding is even more powerful and more threatening, right? And yet, by the same token, as you said, I don't think that when our kids were little, they would have been frightened of that. They'd, oh, that's a little weird. Okay, let's move on. It's not till later that we develop this fear of things that are strange and different, right? What do you got, Diane? Your brain's ticking. I can see it.
It's okay.
So this is a picture of the whole sanctuary supposedly from Solomon's temple, but looking back into.
But again, that notion that a couple of you brought up, the richness or it just,
The opulence.
yes, it just bleeds wealth.
And so to a certain degree, it bleeds wealth, this opulence would make us think that we don't belong, right? And yet, it's also a place that God invites us to. Now, think about that for just a moment. It's clearly a place by look where we don't belong. And yet, God sets up this opulent place as where he invites us to come meet him.
It almost gives the aura of an idol.
Okay,
You know what I mean? Like you
Right.
don't want that, but yet you have this object that people are gonna come to.
so
And yeah, he's gonna be there, but it almost like,
in a foreign temple where that little box is, would be the big statue of the god. And notice the big statues on either side. What's in the center is a spot no bigger than a kid's, it said.
but at the same time, it doesn't say he's gonna sit on it, it says he's gonna
He's,
come above it.
he's going to hover above it. It's not necessarily the place where he sits, because God doesn't have a temporal body. But it is the place where he is going to dwell as we meet him there.
And Wizard of Oz comes to mind.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
the wizard is the big green head
face.
bug.
And see, that's the thing. The Wizard of Oz, I think, was intentionally pulling on this imagery, but in the exact opposite measure. Where God is the infinite God who creates everything and holds everything in balance, he shows up as this little bitty thing. Almost imperceptible, just a voice in the middle of this little space. Whereas in the Wizard of Oz, the big projection up on the screen is this big, massive, foreboding thing, loud and fire. Well, God already did that, right? God's doing that right now as he's giving this. He shows up with the cloud of fire to give them the law, but when he meets with them, he limits himself to something that's completely different than anything they would expect. Which is why, and if my kids were here, they would, as soon as I would start to quote this, they would remember it. Not this Sunday, but next Sunday, we're going to watch the Nativity story. And God wasn't in the fire, and he wasn't in the earthquake, and he wasn't in the whirlwind, but he was in the still small voice. A little bitty spot where the voice of God would speak. You have to be quiet, but what else? You have to be close. You have to be listening, you have to be quiet, and you have to be close. And this is how God is presenting himself to people. Foreign gods say, no, stay away. This is only for me. You must be worthy. And God says, no, come close. Come in.
I think God had to do that because there's a lot of people, when they saw him on the mountain, they were afraid. Don't talk to us, talk through Moses yet. So he has reduced himself. So we wouldn't be afraid. So maybe we won't be afraid.
Absolutely. When he shows himself with all of his cosmic power and the people get afraid, now he says, okay, that's fine. Then I'll give you the smallest part of me that you won't be afraid of. The sad truth is that still small voice we like to just ignore.
For this entire time, humanity was intimidated by God and his vastness,
Oh, sure.
that he had to create something that wasn't so as intimidating.
So I know some of,
Intimidated by a baby, other area.
yeah, you're not gonna be intimidated by a baby. To your point about Jesus, how he came. Remember, these are people who just left Egypt. What does Egypt do for their gods? If you're going with us, we're going to get to go see Luxor. These massive temple complexes to show the power and might of their God. And God's like, no, 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 I'm going to make you a temple. No, I'm not something big, I'm something small,
Tangible.
tangible, personal, even. Anything else you notice?
Was all gold and glitter and that razzle dazzle stuff, was that all, his intent was to draw, because that's gonna draw some focus from anyone, to draw the attention to him, but then, yeah, the area where he was so small that you had to go in close, but was that all the glitter just to draw in the attention?
In many ways, I do think so. On the one hand, it would actually absolutely make this more permanent and long lasting. When you inlay something with gold, I mean, the wood doesn't rot. Once it's covered in gold. I mean, that's why we found the Egyptian sarcophagi that are covered in gold 3,000-4,000 years later. But on the other hand, it draws us in. We're no better than the mosquitoes in the light, right? The bugs and the bug zapper. It's shiny. There's a sense in which it absolutely will draw people to.
Disappeared, when did it cease to?
It depends. Some people claim that Solomon gave it away to the Queen of Sheba. Some people say that it disappeared with Jeremiah when he left Jerusalem. And some say that it was taken away when Jerusalem was finally sacked and destroyed. We don't have a clear sense on when it disappeared. We only know that it's gone. There is a group of people in Ethiopia who claim to be descendants of Jeremiah's exile from Jerusalem, and they claim that they still have it. But no one is allowed even close to the place where they say it sits. So it has not been substantiated that it's there. But we don't really know when it disappeared. Anything else? Next section. 23 through 30. And you shall make a table of acacia wood. 2 cubits shall be its length, a cubit its breadth, a cubit and a half its height. You shall overlay it with pure gold and make a molding of gold around it. And you shall make a rim around it, a handbreadth width, and a molding of gold around the rim. And you shall make for it 4 rings of gold, and fasten the rings to the 4 corners at its 4 legs. Close to the frame the rings shall lie, as holders for the poles to carry the table. You shall make the poles of acacia wood, and overlay them with gold, and the table shall be carried with these. And you shall make its plates and dishes for incense, and its flagons and bowls with which to pour drink offerings. You shall make them of pure gold, and you shall set the bread of the presence on the table before me regularly. So what do you think?
Again, mobile.
Mobile, absolutely. If I was to ask you, you're building a temple, a royal housing place, Most of us would probably say the throne is the first thing you'd build, right? Does anybody have table as their second item? What's a table for? What?
Serving food.
Serving food. What'd you say?
Living junk.
So for the record, we eat at tables, right? But at this point in time in human history, they didn't eat at tables. They ate picnic style on the ground. They lounged together. But a table was absolutely where they would put the preparation, the food that would be served. Don says, mine says, his bread shall be before me at all times. The bread shall be before me at all times. Absolutely. So we have this discussion about a breastplate. We've built the throne for God. And the very next thing he says is, no, we're going to have a place for food. Anybody all of a sudden confused?
Is that I don't know if generosity is the right word, but giving to others or those that come without?
The word is hospitality.
Yeah.
There is a sense in which the first thing God puts out there before anything else, after his place is established, is a place to welcome the outsider, to feed them, to nourish them, to make sure that they are okay before we go forward with anything else. So while on the one hand, this is the mercy seat, right? This is the atonement chair. This is where people are made right with God. But the very next thing is he says, okay, let's have a table. It's time to eat.
It's also overlaid with gold.
Still overlaid with gold.
Now, easier to clean if you're gonna put food on.
Okay, no, there is that part, yes. If it's overlaid with gold, it'd be a little easier to clean. And it's still mobile. But I would not have picked the second item to be a table for serving food, would you?
You know, Pastor, someone told me recently that if you're going through the Old Testament and studying it, look for what tells you there's Jesus. And there's, I think of the bread of communion when I'm hearing this.
So,
It's the place I should look for Jesus.
so everything that you're saying about looking for Jesus and Jesus's ministry, and everything that Larry said earlier about even the birth of Christ, and this is all mirrored. Those two things are mirrored in this. The infinite God in all his glory comes in a little babe that fits in the between the two cherubim. The angels are singing of the coming of Christ, and in between is a little child. He's put in, what does he put in? A manger, a feeding trough, a box, an ark.
Possible occasion.
Of possible occasion wood. In very real sense, he says, I am the bread of life. Feed on me. And you have the child put before them.
You have to go to his table.
All throughout the Gospels, we're going to his table. Everywhere he goes, this is the thing. I don't think Jesus was persecuted because he said the wrong thing. So he did make people mad. I think he got persecuted because he was having too much fun. Everywhere he goes, a dinner party breaks out and he's eating with the wrong people. He invites anyone and everyone to his table. But God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, right? And look at this, the second thing that God has them build is a table with showbread to be ever before me. And just for the record, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, Jim. I'm following your cue. There are 12 loaves to represent the 12 tribes. And there are plates and bowls and cups for drink offerings. and the bread to be served.
You know, the more you talk about it, it sounds like a motorhome to me.
It's getting there. I've got an image in my head I'm hoping we're gonna build to, but yeah, there's a sense in which this is both very mobile and
But that's even symbolism too. He's able to reach you wherever you are. If it's
Yeah.
It's not.
You don't go to him like all the other gods where you have to go to them. Because they're stationary. God goes to you wherever you are.
I mean, of course, that's Jesus and chosen. They're gonna follow me. But
Yeah.
that is like crazy. He says all the time.
Jesus never asked anybody, do you want to be saved? He invites them to follow him, to join him, to dine with him, to be with him. Salvation comes from being in the presence of God. Salvation comes, as we're reading, by being in the presence of God. The first thing that he asks them to build is this mercy seat, the thing that should mediate atonement, right? And the very next thing is a table.
We also have pictures for pouring out, didn't say what, offerings.
So
That's the blood of Christ, and
so there's a symbol of the blood of Christ, but you're going to appreciate what was typically in that wine. It was wine, but at this point in time, it was more often than not a barley beer. Just saying.
Schlitz was there already, huh?
Understand, when you're out in the middle of nowhere and you can't always trust the water, you can trust a fermented drink.
Right.
Now, I will say Charles's point, they did not indulge like we like to indulge. This was not one of those things where you got everybody getting sloshed all the time. There was a notion of you drank to survive, not you drank to get drunk. But there's also that notion from John's gospel where Jesus is at the wedding of Cana and he fills the three big 30-gallon pitchers of water. And what was it? We did the math and it's like 986 bottles of wine, and he says uncork them all. There's a sense in which being in the presence of God is meant to be a joyous celebration. A golden table is not something you just have for a Tuesday lunch, right? The golden table is what you pull out for Christmas or at the wedding or something else. And yet that's what God wants to use every day, all day. Anything else you notice?
By this time, have the Levites been given the task of managing?
Not yet.
Okay.
That's a part of this whole big download that Moses is getting right now. Anything else? Next section
Tells you what kind of beer they're having in the next section.
tells them what kind of beer. Next section.
But
But where. 31 through 40. You shall make a lampstand of pure gold. The lampstand shall be made of hammered work. Its base, its stem, its cups, its calyxes, and its flowers shall be of one piece with it. And there shall be 6 branches going out of its sides. 3 branches of the lampstand out one side of it, and 3 branches of the lampstand out the other side. 3 cups made like almond blossoms, each with calyx and flower on one branch, and 3 cups made like almond blossoms, each with a calyx and flower on the other branch. So for the 6 branches going out of the lampstand. And on the lampstand itself, there shall be 4 cups made like almond blossoms with their calyxes and flowers, and a calyx of 1 piece with it under each pair of the 6 branches going out from the lampstand. Their calyxes and their branches shall be made of 1 piece with it, the whole of a single piece of hammered work of pure gold. You shall make 7 lamps for it, and the lamps shall be set upon it as to give light on the space in front of it. And the tongs and their trays shall be made of pure gold. And it shall be made with all these utensils out of the talent of pure gold. And see that you make them after the pattern for them, which is being shown to you on the mountain. What do you think?
Beaten gold,
What?
beaten gold.
Beaten gold, hammered gold. This is something delicate.
You're saying 38.
38. Its tongs and their trays shall be made of pure gold.
Our mine says it's snuffers and trays.
Ours says
Shall be of pure gold.
Wick trimmers, snuffers, tongs, the utensils you use to care for it. Yes. Anything else?
What's the significance of this set?
What's any of the numbers? There's a lot of numbers.
Yeah, there's a lot of numbers.
So you have 3 branches out each side. Okay. Guess we're not dealing with laws anymore, right? We can erase this. Should have erased this beforehand. Oh, red doesn't erase well. We'll just use black. So you have a lampstand, right? With a base. Okay, and then it says there are 3 branches on each side, right? So you get 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3. What? 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spots for 7 lamps. What's this number 7 for? Perfection, complete, God. It's meant, say that louder, Steve. Tree of life. The tree of life, that notion. There's, each of them is going to have, these flowers all over it, right? 10 is the number of the flowers and calyxes, right? That's what it said. It's meant to look like a flowering tree. Why would we have a flowering tree that gives light? Anybody? What are we picturing? Back to Eden, exactly.
It also represents a menorah, though.
So the menorah is something similar to this, but the menorah has 8. Actually, it's 9. It adds another branch. And that's because of the festival of Hanukkah. When they went to rededicate the temple, they only had enough oil for 1 night's worth of burning the lamps, and yet the light stayed lit for 8 days. And so they light 9 lights to represent the fact that God provided for 8 days worth, and God will provide into the future. But it looks a lot like this. It is patterned after this.
So he's telling him, giving him this directions, and then Moses is interpreting what this will look like, because that's not what, I would have read all this and that's not what I would have come up with.
I wouldn't have had it straight out.
Yeah.
I would have, yeah.
Yeah.
I can't help but notice it's perfect balance.
There's a balance to it, yeah. Now, here's the thing, I imagine that this section right here is done the exact same way that John gets in Revelation, where he is taken into a picture. He's literally probably even taken into the throne room of God and seeing what is up there in the heavens. And so it's being described to him at the same time that he's seeing and experiencing. And then he brings it back down to write down what he has seen and what God has explained.
One translation I have says, you will need 75 pounds of gold to make that.
Talents worth. So 75 pounds of gold is a lot of gold, right?
I could use that, because my wife keeps moving things around, she wouldn't do that with that.
You find one in the diner.
Dolly. There'd be a dolly for that, wouldn't
It's shiny, so he's gonna find
Yeah.
But so there's a sense in which this is meant to symbolize the light of God into this tent, but it's also meant to symbolize that notion of the tree of life. It's meant to symbolize Eden. It's meant to show the 6 days of creation on the side, and then the 7th is the day of rest, right? I mean, these are the things that you would think about when you hear the number 7, and when you think of this tree with beautiful flowers on it. So the first thing is we've got a throne. Okay, that makes sense. Second thing, we get a table for eating, and now we're going to the garden. Anybody feel like maybe this is not where we
See, to me, that represents light.
light? Absolutely.
Yeah, light and food. Yeah, it's like you said, I will provide.
What? Wait a second. God would even symbolize in what he puts in his tabernacle that he wants to provide for us? Surely not. Go for it.
The thing that to me is, it's also represents Christ.
Mhm.
He's the light of the world, but also, I was thinking, he said that we are the light of the world. And there are 7 churches in Revelation. And the thing that gets me is, he said it to beat. Well, Jesus was beaten. I also don't like the symbolism the way this could be going.
This picture is absolutely a precursor of Christ on earth, which is a precursor of the picture in Revelation of us with God in his temple here on earth. These are all meant to very clearly resemble each other. And it's meant to draw us back to Eden and the way things were meant to be. And on the one hand, they're using the imagery of a field command center for battle, and yet outside of the throne, it's going a very different direction, isn't it?
We still have a battle going on today.
We absolutely still have a battle going on today. But if the order here is any indication, God fights his battles not with sword and shield and weapons, but at the table amongst friends. Where light is shown equally on everyone and everything is made known.
And I kind of like that it's hammered and a little bit imperfect and beat up. Because that's another, for me, that's another symbolism. You know, we can come to the table beat up and imperfect and still get served and still have the light.
We still have the light. There's still that level of probably a little bit of imperfection in it. And yet it's made out of what? Gold, which to us is precious. But there's no symbolism in that.
Could be symbolic of heaven.
It's absolutely symbolic of heaven and Eden. Anything else you notice? So for the record, nobody's asked the question. The calyx, do I have any botanists in the room?
Ours said buds and blossoms.
The calyx is literally the reproductive part of the flower. So you have the flower and you have the internal part. So there is a sense in which this isn't just showing the flowers, but this is meant to be reproduced. Who was it said that we are the light of the world? When you come into contact with this, it should be not just something you experience, but something that's implanted in you and you take with you.
In today's medicine, we have vitamin C out of rose hips, which would be the same as nutrients.
This is opulent, and yet there's provision, and yet there is the sense in which it is life-giving. The opulence of Egypt, the opulence of Babylon, the opulence of what they would experience in Rome was violent and evil and destructive. And yet God's opulence is the exact opposite. It brings provision. Anything else?
On the last verse, where it says, which was shown to you on the mount,
Okay,
I don't
so remember where we ended last week.
know.
Oh, you guys forgot about it. You probably haven't went back and listened, have you? So we left,
I don't know how to find it.
okay, well, I'll help you find it, okay? When we left them last week, Moses and Joshua and the 70 elders with Aaron and Nadab and Abihu were brought up onto the side of the mountain, and they spent 7 days there. And then God invited Moses and Joshua into the cloud and the fire on top of Mount Sinai. And so that's where they are when all of this is being given to them. And so this is a reminder that God gave Moses this picture. He didn't just give him the details. This isn't just an audible, write this down, here are the dimensions. He's given Moses an explicit walkthrough of what it will look like. Like I said, I truly believe in some ways Moses he walked up on top of the mountain and then was invited into the throne room of God. He saw this and what it was supposed to look like. Which, side note, I was flipping through stuff this week and I saw an article that talked about that there is a mountain in this area right here where the top third of it is completely black, like it's been charred. And has been for well over 3,000 years. Just saying. Maybe a coincidence there, maybe not. Just
Nothing grows on it? Because usually if a fire comes through, then you get new growth.
I don't know that you can see this. I mean, it's still got, wow, that's disappointing. There's still growth on it. But the top half of it is black instead of brown. And I don't know that any of them out there can see it. You look at Saudi Arabia, Mount Sinai, and you can easily find a picture of this. It's not the traditional place of Mount Sinai, but it seems to fit.
You know, another thing I noticed, Sam, is, God has been very specific in everything he's told them. And everything has to be made exactly the way he specified it. Perfect. And God is perfect.
Why do you think he's given such specific details?
Because he wants things perfect.
I think that that's part of it, but why else might he give such specific details?
So they don't deviate and try to make an idol out of something.
Could be too. I think it points to the fact that where the foreign gods around them couldn't be bothered with the details of daily life, our God cares about the smallest of details. Even the width of the lip on the table. Even to the point of not just putting flowers on the lampstand, but to make sure that you put the reproductive stamina in the flowers on the lampstand. And if God cares about those tiniest of details, might he not also care about the tiniest of details in our life?
Well, he had, if you look at the human body,
Oh,
the
absolutely.
eyes, the ears, everything, the way the blood pressure and the heart and everything works. The tiniest of the vessels and the corpuscles, everything.
And you know, I do alteration, well, I did, but every time you sew, you have a seam. And I thought, the human body doesn't have no seams. That's right.
No seams.
Yeah.
He's made us perfect. We mess up the perfect. In a world that says you can augment yourself because this body isn't perfect, and you can have a better picture and a different picture of what perfection might look like. This makes me think, no, the way God knit us together is intentional. We made it through one chapter. I don't think we've got time to hop into the next one. Well, what do you think? Any final thoughts? It would stand to reason, wouldn't it, that if we're looking at God's dwelling place, with everything we've read in Genesis and the first half of Exodus, that our God would just do things a little differently? The sad reality is, if you continue to read through the Old Testament, you'll see this place that was meant to be a place of welcome where everyone was brought in becomes an exclusive place where people are kept out. Which is why when Jesus enters the temple, his immediate response is to drive out those who keep people away. The merchants and the money changers who say you have to do things this way or you're not allowed in. He says, no, my Father's house is meant to be a house of prayer. So as we prepare to celebrate Christmas, and we see this little manger scene, as we move into Easter, and we see the cross and the death and resurrection, we are meant to see the precursors of those here. Because God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And the message hasn't changed. You lift me up, and I will draw everyone unto me. And anyone who comes to me will not be driven out, but if you come to me and believe in me, I will provide everything that you need. For all of you are my children, made in my image, with my breath, my spirit within you. And that's opulent, and it's magnificent, and yet it's accessible and mobile, because I'm not distant from you, I am with you, and I go with you wherever you go. But this is just technical specifications for what's in the temple. It doesn't really mean anything, right? Let's pray. Lord, may we be reminded that for all your power and glory, for all of you that is so holy and beyond us, you willingly choose to be with us. And you look past our faults and our failures to make us right with you. And you invite us to sit at your table. And you make us your light into the world. Lord, may we embrace that reality and share that hopeful message with anyone and everyone who will hear it. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. And finally,